Welcome to the deep dive. We take complex stuff, break it down, and give you what you really need to know. Today, we're looking at the unsung heroes, you could say, of the digital age, the defenders. You know, in business, everyone talks about the strikers, right? Sales smashing targets, marketing going viral, product teams launching cool stuff. But what about the people keeping the whole operation safe? The ones managing risk so the company can actually, keep playing.
It's a really great analogy, and so true. Think about sports, like football. You might have a star like Messi scoring goals. But remember the 2018 World Cup? The Korean team pulled off that huge upset against Germany, not through flashy offense, but through incredible defense. Collective defense won the day.
Exactly. And that's the angle we're taking for the corporate world today, focusing specifically on the CISO, the Chief Information Security Officer. We're going to explore how information protection isn't just tech anymore. It's become absolutely fundamental to corporate strategy, to growth, protecting everyone.
Right. Our mission here is to really unpack why the CL and SOAR role is so vital now, how the human element is the new battleground for threats, and what the smartest companies are doing to build a strong security culture. We've pulled out some honestly surprising insights and really practical stuff from a comprehensive guide we looked at, essential knowledge on a topic you can't ignore.
And just before we get into the thick of it, a quick shout out to our sponsor, www.cisomarketplace.com. They're a great resource, a real hub for CLS solutions and insights. Definitely worth checking out if you're in this space.
Okay, so let's really unpack this victory of defense idea in a business context. You mentioned football. How does that play out day to day in a company? Well, the source material lays it out nicely. Your sales, marketing, product team, dones. They're the strikers, often chasing short-term wins, hitting immediate targets. But the defenders, that's risk management, and information protection is a huge part of that. They're focused on ensuring that mid to long-term solid growth. They keep the company stable. I mean, think back to major financial crises like 97 or 2008. Companies hyper-focused only on short-term gains got absolutely hammered. It showed just how critical risk management, including security, really is.
So it's evolved beyond just preventing hacks. It's actually about enabling sustainable growth and maybe even adding value. That's quite a shift from the old view of security being a cost center.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Traditionally, info protection was about the CIA triad, confidentiality, integrity, availability, basic stuff. But now it's seen as a core corporate management function. It directly contributes to growth by minimizing those security risks. And yeah, the value creation part is fascinating. Security can actually create customer value. Remember Pantech's Vega secret phone back in 2013?
Vaguely, yeah. Fingerprint sensor, right.
Exactly. Fingerprint verification for privacy. Or think about Apple's iPhone, making fingerprint ID mainstream. These weren't just security features people tolerated, they were selling points. They built trust. Security became a differentiator.
That's a brilliant point, turning a potential negative into a positive, a competitive edge. So if security is now this high-level corporate strategy, what kinds of broader risks does it tackle beyond just the obvious data breaches?
The source points to several big ones: legal risk, financial risk, and critically reputational risk. A major incident can cause massive public backlash, trigger investigations, lead to boycotts, not to mention the direct financial costs from fines or lawsuits. So yeah, security risk isn't siloed anymore. It's a key part of overall management risk. It can seriously impact market standing, cash flow, everything. It can be an existential threat.
Okay, that really elevates the role. So if the CISO is the strategic player, how is their mission formally defined now? And how does that fit into the company structure?
The definition our source uses is telling. A business leader who supports sustained growth of the company by minimizing security risk of the organization and business. Notice it says business leader, not just tech manager. And it emphasizes that it's not just the CISO's department doing the work. It requires collaboration across the board with outsourcing teams, IT ops, HR, legal, everyone. It's a company-wide thing.
A team sport, as you said.
Definitely.
Which brings us to information protection governance. Sounds formal, but what does it actually mean for how a company operates?
It's basically about ensuring that decisions about information protection are made at the right level, aligned with the company's overall governance. Think of something like the ISO 27014 standard as a guide. It provides a structure suggesting, reviewing, directing, monitoring, evaluating security efforts. Crucially, it involves top management, the governing body, and other stakeholders. The key here is active involvement from the top. Top management needs to appoint an executive-level CISO, give them real authority, approve the necessary resources budget, people, and champion that company-wide collaboration. Without that genuine top-down commitment, the CISO is fighting with one hand tied behind their back.
Right. So the board, the CEO, they can't just delegate security and wash their hands of it. They need to own it.
They really do. They set the tone, they provide the resources. Now, where the CISO sits organizationally matters a lot, too. The source says the most desirable setup is the CISO reporting directly to the CEO.
Makes sense. Gives them authority, visibility.
Exactly. Authority, budget clout, and a clear view of company-wide risk. But often, especially early on, you see the CISO reporting to the CIO.
Ah, the classic setup. But I can see potential problems there.
Big potential conflicts. IT operations is often driven by efficiency, speed, keeping things running smoothly. Information protection is driven by minimizing risk, which sometimes means slowing things down or adding friction for safety. Their core missions can clash.
Yeah, that tension must be constant. Security versus convenience. How does a CISO navigate that without just being the Department of No? Always seen as putting the brakes on things.
That is the tightrope they walk. It's why another structure, having the CISO report into a management support function, maybe the CFO, HR, compliance, or audit, is often seen as better than reporting to the CIO.
Why is that?
It generally gives the CISO broader visibility across the company, beyond just IT, and fosters collaboration better. At the end of the day, a good CISO needs to be an influencer, able to argue for changes to the structure itself if it's hindering effective security. It's a leadership challenge.
Okay, so structure's important. What about the actual duties? You mentioned they go beyond the legal minimums. How so?
Yeah, the legal definitions can be quite narrow. Like, Korea's Electronic Financial Transactions Act focuses heavily on IT security specifics. The Information and Communications Network Act is a bit broader. It covers administrative systems, vulnerability checks, incident response, and this interesting concept of pre-inspection of information protection.
Which sounds like what we'd call security by design, right? Building it in early.
Exactly. Yeah. Baking security into the planning and design phases. But the practical duties in a real business go further. They explicitly include managing information protection governance, that whole strategic piece, and constantly adapting to new regulations. That's a huge part of the job that isn't always spelled out in law.
Gotcha. And the source mentioned an Information Protection Management Committee. Why is that so important for making this collaboration happen?
This committee is key for that top-level buy-in and cross-functional alignment. And the source makes a really crucial distinction about who should be on it. Older rules might have suggested department heads, but newer standards, like ISMSP in Korea, push for executives. Ideally, the CEO chairs it, with other key C-suite members involved.
So it's not just middle managers talking shop, it's the actual leadership making strategic decisions about security.
Precisely. The agenda shouldn't get bogged down in technical details. It should focus on managerial issues, resource allocation, strategic direction.
That makes a huge difference in impact, I imagine.
It does. And supporting that committee, you need strong working-level teams, ideally dedicated security teams reporting directly to the CISO. This avoids information getting filtered or distorted if it has to go through, say, IT operations first, where priorities might differ.
Okay, this sounds like a demanding role. High stakes, constant vigilance. What about keeping the security team itself motivated? It can't be easy being the defender all the time.
That's a really critical point the source brings up. It cites a survey showing nearly half of hands-on security staff wanted to change jobs, often citing things like low status of the department or feeling like there's no future vision.
Wow, that's alarming.
It is. And it links back to governance and how the role is perceived. It also connects to this interesting Harvard Business Review study from 2010. Managers thought things like praise or bonuses were the top motivators.
But they weren't.
Not according to the staff themselves. For them, the biggest drivers for having a best day were making progress in work and effective collaboration. And guess what caused the worst days? Difficulty collaborating.
So if the security team feels isolated or like they can't get things done because of roadblocks, that's not just bad for morale, it actively undermines the company's security.
Right. You got it. So the CISO's job isn't just setting policy, it's actively fostering a culture of collaboration, making it a defined duty almost. That's essential for the security team to feel effective and make real progress. And resources like our sponsor, www.cisomarketplace.com, can actually help CISOs here, offering tools and insights for navigating exactly these kinds of organizational and cultural hurdles to build that collaboration.
Okay, let's shift gears a bit. We've talked about the CISO's role. Now let's get into what many call the weakest link, the human factor. You mentioned this era of legalization of security. What does that mean practically?
It basically means security isn't optional anymore. It's law. Things like the Personal Information Protection Act, the Information and Communications Network Act in Korea, compliance is mandatory for almost everyone. It's changed the game. You see security compliance all over job descriptions now. Companies have to do it or face serious consequences.
But even with all these laws and fancy tech, breaches happen constantly. Is that where the human element comes crashing in?
That's exactly what the source argues. The human factor is the new front line. Attackers aren't just hitting networks, they're targeting people's minds, their habits, their assumptions. Ransomware is the perfect example. It usually gets in because someone clicks a link or opens an attachment in an email, cleverly disguised as something legitimate. A job application, a shipping notice, a tax form.
And the cost of that single click, I hear it's way more than just the ransom payment. The source paints a pretty grim picture, right? A nightmare scenario.
Oh, it's absolutely a nightmare. The ransom itself, maybe a couple $1,000s per PC, sounds bad, but it's truly just the tip of the iceberg. For a decent-sized company, the source calculates the real costs. The iceberg torso are massive. Losses from business disruption, brand damage, maybe 1% of annual sales gone. Market share loss, another 1%. Users leaving, maybe 10% churn. Then add infrastructure recovery, legal fees.
Yeah.
It dwarfs the ransom.
Right.
And often, the initial vulnerability comes from inside human error, maybe even malicious insiders. An EY survey mentioned found 57% of leaks were linked back to executives and staff.
Over half. So it's not always some shadowy hacker group. It could be Bob in accounting making a mistake. But here's the weird thing the source points out. Most employees say they think security is important, like over 80% in one survey. How does that square with them being the biggest risk?
That's the paradox, isn't it? What the source calls the discrepancy between perception and reality. People believe it's important, intellectually they get it. But when you look at the actual threat data, direct human factors were nearly 25% of threats in 2018, up significantly from the year before. And here's the kicker. Dig into personal information leaks specifically, and over 60% are due to human factors, management mistakes, insiders leaking data deliberately, issues with outsourced staff.
So wait, add those up. You're saying well over half, maybe 60% or more of all security threats ultimately trace back to people.
That's the stark reality presented, over 60%. It reveals this almost ironic phenomenon. We know security matters, but we constantly choose the dangerous but convenient method over the safe but uncomfortable one. We bypass the controls because it's easier or faster.
Like ignoring the safety briefing on a plane because you've heard it before.
Kind of. Or like the source's analogy with bus rules. You accept safety rules on a bus, like no hot drinks. But people push back against information security rules, seeing them purely as inconvenient obstacles, not safety measures for the whole bus.
So the challenge isn't knowledge, it's behavior. It's deeply ingrained habits. How on earth do you fix that? How do you bridge that gap between knowing and doing?
Well, the core idea isn't about forcing change down people's throats. It's about, as the source puts it, stimulating the switch that people think of, making them connect security to their own experiences, their own choices, helping them see security not as an obstacle to convenience, but as part of achieving a better, safer kind of convenience. It involves 3 steps. Figuring out the starting point, the contact point, taking gradual steps, and then keeping it going.
Stimulating the switch. I like that. It's less confrontational. So how does a CISO find that contact point in their organization's culture? Where do they start?
They need to diagnose the organization first. What's the culture like? Is it all about speed? Or is there room for considering direction too? Then, assess compliance. How familiar are people with the rules? Are the rules actually followed? How are changes to laws handled? And finally, look at incident awareness. Do people know about breaches in similar companies? How is that info shared internally? Are lessons learned actually applied? This paints a picture of where the culture currently stands on security.
So it's really about deep observation and understanding the existing environment before trying to change it. Makes sense. Which leads to this idea of team play and communication.
Absolutely fundamental. Security is everyone's job, not just the CISOs. A key concept here is the security control acceptance rate. Basically, how fast can other departments realistically adopt new security measures? The security team needs to pace itself, match the speed of the business units, and communication has to be constant but also smart. Get involved early in the planning stages, talk in their language, business impact, not obscure technical terms. Focus on the positive. Here's how you can do this securely, not just don't do that.
That positive framing sounds huge. Less Department of Know, more Department of Know-how.
Exactly. And managing emotions is part of it too as a control department. Communicate before rolling out changes.
What about this aesthetics of waiting idea? It sounds a bit zen.
It kind of is. but it's practical. It means guiding, not dictating, explaining continuously, waiting for teams to ask for security reviews sometimes rather than forcing them, giving people time to digest and accept new controls, using the nudge effect, gentle persuasion, like sharing relatable stories, a day in the life of security, to build empathy rather than just issuing mandates. It's subtle influence.
A very human-centric approach. Okay, what happens when violations do occur? The source says focus on the cause, not just the phenomenon. Give me an example.
Sure. Say people keep leaving sensitive documents out on their desks. That's the phenomenon. The easy fix is a warning email. But maybe the cause is that the employee's desk is tucked away in a corner where they feel unobserved, so they get lax. The real fix might be moving the desk, changing the environment.
Addressing the root issue.
Yeah, exactly. Or a more serious example from the source. An employee keeps leaving their work computer on overnight. The phenomenon is the powered-on PC, the cause. They're using it after hours for personal stuff like virtual currency trading.
Okay, that's way more serious than just forgetting to shut down.
Right. Just warning them about power saving misses the huge security risk. The real response needs to be robust. Maybe forcing shutdowns remotely, blocking those sites, a company-wide notice about policy, maybe even involving HR. Focusing on the cause leads to the right solution.
That makes total sense. Address the underlying problem. Okay, shifting back to the CISO, how do they actually get the money for all this? Securing budget is always tough.
Yeah, the eternal battle. In some sectors, like finance in Korea, there are regulations like the 557 rule, 5% of IT staff dedicated to security, 7% of the IT budget for security. That helps. But for other companies, the source suggests CISOs can leverage official guidelines even if they're just recommendations, like the guidelines on information protection measures under the Information and Communications Network Act. It recommends investing more than 5% of the IT budget in security. Even as a recommendation, it provides a strong argument, a legal-ish hook, to persuade management, even if the CFO pushes back.
So, using official guidelines as leverage, are there actual legal cases that help make the argument for spending money on security?
Oh yeah. The source brings up some powerful ones from Korea. The KT data leak case in 2012 basically established that if you follow the regulations, you might avoid liability. If you don't, you're likely negligent. Another one, the open market case from 2008, said even if you meet basic technical requirements, you still need to take protective measures reasonably expected from social conventions. This justifies investing in defenses against new threats, not just ticking boxes.
So you can't just rest on your laurels, you need to keep up.
Right. And a third case, Pompood 2015, explicitly called out not implementing security measures just to save money as a very serious violation. That directly tackles the cost-cutting argument. These cases give CSOs ammunition for budget discussions.
Those are powerful precedents. Okay, so you get the budget. Now, how do you make security training stick? It's often seen as boring, a mandatory chore people click through.
The key is shifting from making it a duty to giving it meaning. It's not just delivering slides. It's interpretation rather than delivery. Focus on the real-world consequences. The good outcomes of doing it right. The bad outcomes of getting it wrong. And again, link it back to cause rather than phenomenon. Use concrete examples of violations and why they happen, like that desk location issue.
Frank, get relatable.
Exactly. Use real stories, maybe things observed during site visits. Have senior people deliver some training. The CISO talking to new hires sends a powerful message. Frame it around employee safety too, not just company compliance. How to spot phishing emails protects them personally. That resonates. And look for ways to make it continuous, penetrating daily life. Answer a quick question in the hallway, then follow up with a helpful email. Turn everyday interactions into learning moments.
I like that spontaneous education. So, what are these recognition conversion devices the source talks about, ways to flip that mental switch?
These are tools to make people think differently, to connect the dots themselves. You can use news articles about breaches, or even historical analogies. The source mentions an old debate in Korea about removing an overpass convenience versus safety, especially for kids. It highlights how perspective matters. What seems convenient isn't always best.
Using analogies to make them question assumptions.
Right. Or using emotional triggers like discussing deeply ingrained habits. The source uses the example of which side people walk on to show that behaviors can change, even if it takes effort. And then presenting facts that are real but not recognized, highlighting the hidden dangers in everyday tech.
Like what?
Like free public Wi-Fi.
Huh?
Super convenient, right? But potentially wide open for hackers to sniff your data. Or Bluetooth on your phone, always on. Could be an eavesdropping risk.
Oh, wow, okay.
IP cameras, home security cams, hackable if you don't change the default password.
Yeah.
Smart TVs connected to the internet. They have mics, cameras, Wi-Fi, potential entry points.
It's kind of terrifying when you list it like that. Things we use without a second thought.
Exactly. And social media. The source calls it an optimal ecosystem for attacks. Loads of targets. Anonymity, easy to trick people into clicking, spreads like wildfire, perfect for social engineering. Companies need controls around its use. The point is, once employees see the risks in their personal lives, they start to care more about the risks to the company's data. It makes security less abstract. It shifts thinking from, why is this inconvenient, to how can we make this safe?
That's a really smart psychological approach. Okay, so you flip some switches, you're building this culture. How do you make it last? And how do you measure something as fuzzy as awareness or culture?
This is where that famous Peter Drucker line comes in again. Culture eats strategy for breakfast. Making security part of the culture is way more powerful than just having a security strategy document. Because awareness can flicker. It's individual. Culture is organizational. It's shared. It sticks.
But culture feels so intangible. How do you manage it? Drucker also said if you can't measure it, you can't improve it.
Right. So you have to find ways to quantify it. Even though it's in the human thinking domain, you do it by collecting realistic security indicators. Things like training completion rates, how many people report suspicious emails, requests for security advice. Those are awareness indicators. Then you have compliance indicators, policy adherence rates, number of violations detected. You can create a scoring system. Maybe start everyone at 100 points, deduct for violations, add points for proactive behavior, apply it to individuals and departments.
Okay, so you're tracking metrics. Then what?
Then you do periodic cumulative management. Track these scores over time, quarterly, semi-annually, share the results with department heads. And the boldest step, company-wide disclosure, publicly, within the company. Rank departments, maybe even individuals. Report the annual scores right up to the CEO who gets scored too.
Whoa, scoring the CEO. That takes guts.
It shows commitment. And crucially, you link these scores to real consequences. KPIs, bonuses, maybe even promotion criteria.
Right.
That makes security part of everyone's job description, part of the company fabric.
That definitely sounds like it would get people's attention. But you have to keep refining those metrics, right? Make sure they're fair and relevant.
Absolutely. The source stresses reviewing the rationality of the indicator standards every year. Things change. You need to adapt, minimize resistance.
Okay, that gives us a way to measure and sustain. But awareness isn't foolproof, is it? People are people. What are the limits and how do you compensate?
You're right. There are inherent limits. Awareness levels fluctuate. You can't automate thinking. People naturally drift back to convenience. And they can be swayed by things like customer complaints about security friction, user traction, the source calls it.
Yeah, if customers complain something is too hard to use because of security, employees might start thinking internal security is too complex too.
Exactly. So you need countermeasures. First, continuous monitoring and behavior analysis. Use your existing tech, NAC, DLP, firewalls to gather indirect indicators. Login patterns, PC power usage, malware infections. Feed that data into the awareness scores. Flag anomalies for potential audits.
Using tech to verify the human behavior.
All right. Second, periodic security awareness assessment. Regularly evaluate using all the indicators, checks, even tracking complaints. Third, and this is key, establish security philosophy in decision-making. Make reviewing information security issues a mandatory step in all approval processes, right up to the CEO. No decision gets made without considering the security angle.
Weaving it into the very process of doing business.
Exactly. And finally, the use of a security statement. A simple, powerful declaration for the CEO, prominently displayed. Something like, customer data belongs to the customer. It's a constant reminder, a touchstone for guiding decisions and resolving disputes. Ultimately, the source concludes, it's the underlying management philosophy on information security that overcomes the limits of awareness alone. That's the ultimate backstop.
Wow. What a journey. We've gone from the CIO says like a technical gatekeeper to a strategic business partner. We've really unpacked the human factor, how it's both the biggest vulnerability and potentially the strongest defense. And we've seen how companies can actually build and measure a security-aware culture.
Yeah, it's clear that information protection isn't just an IT task anymore. It's truly collaborative, involves the entire company, and is absolutely essential for staying competitive and resilient in today's world, especially with security becoming so heavily regulated and personal.
So here's something to think about. In this world where security rules are everywhere, but human behavior is still the wild card, what's one proactive step you can take, starting today, personally or at work, to make awareness a real shield for your valuable information?
And let's give one more big thank you to our sponsor, www.cisomarketplace.com. Seriously, check them out for resources and solutions to help CISOs and strengthen your company's security posture.
That's it for this deep dive. Thanks for listening. We'll catch you next time.